Ready for some proper British horror? You're watching Beyond the Trailers review of The Quiet Ones.
There's something there with you, isn't there?
What's that? Where's it coming from there?
She's here.
While Universal ruled the horror genre in the 1930s and 40s, and later American independent film in the 1960s and 70s, in the 1950s it was all about the UK's Hammer horror. In fact, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee got their start and made it big as two of Hammer's biggest stars. But all eras come to an end, and Hammer's ended when Hollywood began to make their own horror films, no longer distributing Hammers stateside. But today, with the horror genre enjoying perhaps an all-time high, 8 horror films were released last year with 7 set for this year, Hammer is in the midst of a comeback. They remade the cult hit Swedish horror film Let the Right One In back in 2010, but ended up using an American director, Matt Reeves, and American star, Chloe Grace Moretz. But they found much more success going the patriotic route, a la J.K. Rowling's insistence that the Harry Potter films only feature UK actors. Thus, The Woman in Black not only starred Daniel Radcliffe, but was an adaptation of a classic British horror story. That film cost just $15 million to make and brought in $127 million worldwide. By Jove, I think they've got it. And now there's The Quiet Ones. Granted, it has an American director, but the cast is decidedly British. There's Jared Harris, who brought considerable UK charm to Mad Men for several seasons, and also happens to be the son of famous British actor Richard Harris. Catching Fire's Finnick Odair also stars, yes, he's British. Olivia Cooke and Aaron Richards are also British, while Rory Fleck Bryn is from Ireland. Plus, the whole thing was shot in the UK for that authentic Hammer feel. But while American audiences love Downton Abbey, Sherlock, and of course Harry Potter, can Hammer really stand out in a very, very crowded field? Well, what do you know? We have the very first public service warning against supernatural STDs. That's really the takeaway that I got from The Quiet Ones, which is unfortunate because I really wanted to like this film. I'm a big fan of Jared Harris. I got the chance to sit down with him and interview him about this movie and the upcoming Poltergeist remake that he's also just wrapped. I hope that turns out better than this film. And I'm also have become a very big fan of Sam Claflin. I really liked the work that he did in The Hunger Games: Catching Fire as Finnick Odair, which was surprising to me because I thought he was so ineffectual and really just forgettable, plain old forgettable in Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. But here, he's also very good, though. The acting is very good from both Jared Harris and Sam Claflin. Claflin plays someone who's very different than Finnick Odair, so I'm very impressed with his acting abilities, and he seems to be another pretty boy actor who wants to not capitalize on his looks. He doesn't play the hot guy here, which I think is good. It'll be interesting to see if these guys are able to have that success and take all the roles, I guess. Although I think that there's something to be said that, a lot of times just like not traditionally attractive women can be considered very sexy by a lot of guys. I think a lot of women, I can speak to this, finds you're not typically attractive guy to be very sexy as well. I think we don't want everyone to be Ken dolls. I think that would be bland and boring. And, usually the character roles went to your Dustin Hoffman types, who has been very sexy in some roles. But if people like Sam Claflin are taking those roles, what's that going to mean for diversity going forward? But anyway, back to The Quiet Ones. The film, it takes place during the 70s, and I think a big problem is that the film kind of seems like it was made in the 70s and has some of the problems from that era of movie making. Of course, for horror film, there was some fantastic films that came out at that period. Right before the 70s, of course, there was The Shining, I believe 1968, I think that was that year. Then you had The Night of the Living Dead also coming out right before the 70s. But there was a period of time, Rocky Horror Picture Show, there was a period of time in the 70s where they were churning out kind of like these horror films. I believe Hammers actually was one of them when they were trying to get back on track. In my interview with Jared Harris, he mentioned Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde was one of those films. But those films had a campiness to them and a sexiness that this film lacks. And this film has the potential to go in a sexy direction, true to form to a lot of college experiments. There's some other kind of experimenting going on, and people aren't really focusing on much on their studies as they should. But the film never really goes in that direction either, perhaps because it wants to have, a more all age friendly rating. But I think that if you're not going to go in that direction, I don't understand why you would introduce that aspect to the film anyway. The film never really goes in any direction. It has a whole bunch of ideas that it kind of touches on, but it never picks one and really embraces it. It's a very simple script, and I think today's audiences expect smarter horror films. For instance, Oculus is actually right in theaters. We'll be competing with this film, and Oculus is a smarter film that thinks at its story more. And speaking of elements that aren't really utilized, I wasn't quite sure as to why they had the whole, filming aspect here. Sam Claflin's character plays an AV guy who actually doesn't even attend this university. And I think they could have done something with that as well. He's an outcast. He has a line at the beginning of the film where he says, I could never get into this school. And later on he goes to do some research. And I think they kind of show that he feels a little out of his element. And I think that's a lot to the credit of Sam Claflin as an actor who makes you feel that, even though the script doesn't really introduce that. And I think that could have been played with as well, kind of almost like an educational class system. But anyway, he's an AV assistant who helps out with this experiment, and I saw no reason for him to be there filming things because they never really utilized that. He never was, he would sometimes review the footage, but he didn't really discover anything we didn't see while he was filming. And sometimes there were things would be happening that he filmed that he wasn't aware of that he never apparently went back and reviewed. He's like, I really should have been checking this footage every day, I guess. So I think the only reason that element was there was to try and capitalize on the current trend of found footage, but I think the movie would have been better without it having to remove that aspect, and maybe he could have just been an assistant to Jared Harris. Also, as I said, I really would have liked to have seen this film turn out better. I want Jared Harris's career to do well, same for Sam Claflin, and also Hammer Horror. I would love to see Hammer Horror return to form and to be a big brand name again in the genre. I think it's always great for people to be able to maintain a legacy. And one of the things I liked about the movie is in the very beginning, Hammer has a new logo. At least it's the first time I've seen it. And it borrows a little bit from Marvel Studios logo, but it shows some stills from horror comics and old horror movies. And it really did a great job of putting you in the mood. And it's just too bad that this film just didn't quite deliver. Just like I think that their experiment should get like a C-, I think the film should get around there too. Not enough though, because again, I think the work from Claflin and Harris is quite good, and the directing is good. I think the real problem is just the script. I think the script just doesn't go far enough in any direction. And I had a problem with a recent film for the same reasons. It's unfortunate that they Hollywood, today. We have a very smart audience, and it just can't afford anymore to just skim the surface. All right, so that's my review of The Quiet Ones. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll check out my interview with Jared Harris. There'll be a link here at the end of the video, and you can check out some other episodes as well right now.